Hi, hello, hello, welcome，欢迎大家今天来参加我们的围炉对话活动。Let's see, as we wait for people to join in, I'd like to introduce our community to any new viewers. I'm Michelle, the founder of the Society of Heart's Delights, or Yuan She in Chinese. We established our community platform right before the pandemic hit and have been hosting online events. We're a bilingual community of Chinese immigrants who moved to America as adults and work in diverse fields. We create opportunities for our members to engage meaningfully with local life and culture, contribute to the public good, and cultivate a sense of belonging while having fun. Our overarching mission is to bridge our Chinese immigrant community with a diverse of perspectives, such as Mexican, Vietnamese, LGBTQ communities, and local arts, nonprofits, and civics groups in order to promote multifaceted understanding, community bridging, and enrichment in the placemaking work we do. Recently, the topic of sexual harassment is really heated in our community. We've been hearing about horrible employee sexual assault case in China at Alibaba, in the US with the governor of New York, and many others. Former Governor Cuomo resigned because of a sexual harassment scandal. But too often there is little or no accountability for bad behavior in the workplace. Sexual harassment is an epidemic around the world and is a horrifying reality for millions of women in the workplace. Today, we'll be discussing sexual harassment in the workplace and holding the powerful accountable. I'm so honored to have Ann Ravel, an esteemed California attorney who we are lucky to have right here in Bay Area. Over the last 30 plus years, Ann has held too many positions to list, including Santa Clara County Counsel for nearly a decade, serving as chairperson of Federal Election Commission at the appointment of President Obama. Yeah, I can see the pictures behind Ann Ravel with Obama. Deputy Assistant Attorney General of the US Department of Justice, and more recently, International Election Observer in multiple countries, including Brazil, Mexico, and Ecuador, as well as advising Canada. She's a lifelong champion of women's rights and minority rights, and has fought on the front lines for transparency and accountability in both government and the private sector. I can't think of a better guest to talk about how to hold the powerful accountable, because she's been working hard, very hard to do exactly that. Welcome, Ann. It's so great to have you here.
Of course, unmute. Thank you so much, Michelle, for that really kind introduction. I appreciate it. And I want everyone to know I'm really happy that you're here to talk about this important subject.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you are named one of the two lead attorneys in the landmark sexual harassment case and reached a $310 million settlement with Alphabet, the parent company of Google. To date, this is the largest commitment by any company in the sexual harassment lawsuits. The settlement included more than 80 changes to internal policies and procedures spanning across many employee-facing aspects of Google. Regarding about reading about this case is really exciting because it sounds like a new, more holistic approach to an age-old problem. So my first question is, can you talk briefly about the context of the case and some of the unique circumstances leading up to the lawsuits, including the role of the media Google employees. I'm curious to know how much you think these things played a role and shaped the lawsuits that followed.
That's a really good question. And actually, the impetus from the lawsuit that we filed was exactly the unbelievable media coverage that happened when Google employees heard that this high-paid executive at Google had been involved in sexual harassment with an employee, and we had information that he was involved in a lot more than just one incident, numerous incidents, and as well as another lawyer, the head of the law office at Google, was also involved with sexual harassment and had sexual relationships with numerous women who were his subordinates. And both of those people, but in particular, the concern was with the high-paid executive who was the person who invented the Android phone. And he, while they knew that he had been involved in this sexual harassment and agreed with the veracity of it, the board had been given instructions or recommendations from HR that they should pay him $65,000 and say goodbye and have him leave the company. Well, what they did was, at their own discretion, without any discussion with others, and probably because there was only one woman on the board, they decided instead to give him $90 million and to invest in his new company. And when this became apparent about that amount of money, as well as the fact that the lawyer was also asked to leave at a certain point, but he managed to cash out an enormous amount of money as well, that he had gotten in stock and the like. And that caused the employees to get together, organize, and on November 8, 2018, in November 2018, over 20,000 employees around the world in what was estimated to be about 50 countries or cities walked out of their Google workplace in protest of the money that was given, in particular to Rubin. That got an amazing amount of press. And those employees who organized this were extremely savvy in the way that they both organized it as well as they garnered all the press. And I think the fact that it became so public and there was so much approbation, let's put it, of the company made a big difference, that they were able to cause that to happen. And that is what was the impetus for us to file the litigation, because we knew about these incidents, we had details about them, we had information about it, but then we were able to get much more information as well. And we filed it purposely as what's called a shareholder derivative suit, which means a shareholder sued claiming that his stock value went down, and because the value of the company went down because of this bad behavior and how people were reacting to it. And because of that, and I know you haven't asked this question, but I do think that because of that, we knew we could frame this suit as one where the company had to change its culture. We had to make sure that these senior men, both in the boardroom and as executives, understood the responsibilities that they had to the women and other minorities in the workplace.
Yeah, talking about, so it seems like the plaintiffs are some of the shareholders. So I'm curious, what type of shareholders? Like does the law require how many shares you hold in order to have this?
No, there wasn't a requirement. You just actually had to be the owner of some shares.
So I own 2 shares of Google.
You could be a plaintiff.
Great to know.
Right. And ultimately, the outcome of our lawsuit was not to give money to the
yeah, we're getting to that question. So when you first decided to get involved in this case, did you think this could be big?
You know, I was asked by a lawyer who does shareholder derivative suits generally, which I don't do. I much more often do cases that relate to sexual harassment, civil rights, other kinds of abuses, consumer cases. But because I think, I mean, honestly, I will say, because they knew that it was important to have prominent women lawyers also as part of the group of lawyers that were going to be handling the case. I was asked to do it, as well as Louise Rennie, who was the city attorney for many years in San Francisco, and also someone who cares deeply about these issues. So we worked together on this, and I decided to get involved, not thinking that it was going to be a big case necessarily, not thinking about money or anything like that, but just thinking it's time for people to be accountable for the kinds of actions that they are taking, particularly here in Silicon Valley, but obviously we know it's happening in China as well. But Silicon Valley companies were famous for having sort of the bro culture, where the men would go out to bars and have parties, and everybody would get drunk, and they would be sexually abusing women. So this was not just at Google, it was pervasive. And for that reason, it seems like, to me, a way to make change in the culture in corporations.
This is great. Most of attorneys are women to represent our yeah. So let's talk about money first. How is the $310 million going to distribute it? And did the plaintiffs receive any of that?
The plaintiffs did not receive any money. And how it was distributed is this. We had certain requirements for the settlement. And we wanted a global settlement because we wanted to impact all of the issues that we saw as discriminatory, including sexual harassment. So it was not even isolated to sexual harassment. And what we negotiated was that Alphabet or Google would be, first and foremost, they would have a diversity and inclusion council that was independent. So while there were going to be people who were part of the hierarchy at Google, they also were going to appoint people who we wanted, who were women, who were, and also a man, who were very active in the area of civil rights and sex harassment and discrimination. And so they ultimately agreed to that. And they also agreed that they were going to promote and hire more women and more women of color, more people of color. And one of the ways they were going to do that was something that we talked to them about. In fact, I don't know how many of the people that are watching you are from the Bay Area, but one of the big issues for me was that they needed to hire from community colleges, because that is a place where a lot of young people who are not of higher economic status and also who are minorities, women, tend to go to school. And I wanted to make sure there was a pathway for them to get ahead also in the company. And then we also insisted, aside from the money, and I think you may get to this question, but we also, focusing on the issues of sexual harassment, we changed how they handle things. So they can no longer, if someone is being investigated for sexual harassment, they can no longer give them an enormous amount of money or up the amount of stock that they'll be able to cash out when they leave. So we changed that policy. We also changed policies relating to non-disclosure agreements, because those are still pervasive in Silicon Valley, but they agreed that they would no longer require women to sign those non-disclosure agreements, because that was one way. What people don't realize about those agreements is, if those women, when they file complaints, have to sign those, it may not affect their own monetary or other way that their allegations are dealt with. But what it does is it creates a culture in the organization where other women don't know who to avoid. They don't know what happened. And it's important for there to be transparency so people can protect themselves.
Yeah. First, sounds like this money was spent in recruitment, investing recruitment, recruit more women and from diverse like background, cultural backgrounds, and underrepresented.
Exactly. That's where most of the money was spent. Of course, they had to set up this also diversity and inclusion council and the like. They also, I mean, the request was that they do more education and more work, and have people who are going to be more responsive when there are concerns about sexual harassment or other discrimination.
Yeah, I agree. This is wonderful. Talking about, you mentioned the diversity and the inclusion council they set up just for solving this issue. And I read the news, and they have you even I heard from you, like you even require CEO Pichai to see in the council, and he has to attend the meeting, and like every quarter for the first year. And do you have any updates for this kind of practice from
Google? I think no, but I think that what was recognized, and I have to admit, I mean, Google stepped up on this as well, but they recognized that the whole idea was they have to take this seriously, and everyone in the organization has to take it seriously, all the way down and all the way up to the high level people, the directors and the board members, as well as the managers. And having Sundar Pichai be there at those meetings showed a commitment that he wanted the rest of the organization to know there had to be change. Yeah,
the settlement document is 177 pages long. Yeah, they made like 80 more than 80 policy updates and changes.
Exactly.
That must be a lot of negotiation work hours with them.
It was really interesting because, of course, we initially had, we were in court first. That was the beginning. So we were before Judge Walsh, who then retired, unfortunately. But then we ultimately went to a JAMS mediator, and we had several days in San Francisco where we met with them. But then came, the lawyers. And so we spent an enormous amount of time, and this was, by then it was COVID. And so we were all on conference calls for hours and hours all day long. So it did take a long time.
This is great. I know you and all this attorney team push very hard to get rid of NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, and make the arbitration clause optional, knowing that result will set a good example for other tech companies to follow. So now, almost 1 year later, can you point to any concrete sustainable culture or systemic changes at Google? And what about other tech companies? And have you seen any company following Google's example?
I think there has been change at Google, if only because they agreed to all of this. I know that the Diversity and Inclusion Council is meeting, and they will be reviewing some of the discipline of the higher level executives. So I think that process is working, as well as NDAs, of course, because they agreed to it. I think, from just what I know reading the press, that the existence of NDAs are still a problem in Silicon Valley. But there also has been some movement. I know a legislator, Connie Leyva, in the California legislature, has talked to a lot of people and has put a bill together to prevent companies from having NDAs. So I don't think it's yet passed, but I think it's a step forward. Whether there have been step forward in other tech companies or not, I don't know, but I think that there's still problems.
Yeah, definitely. But this example is very good to show the rest of the tech companies and even the nationally. Yeah.
Well, and frankly, I mean, one of the things that we thought was so meaningful, aside from having the CEO participate and show the commitment, but also, when your employees are so motivated by this kind of treatment of other employees, that they are willing to walk out in that way, it should be a really strong signal to other tech companies that they've got to consider these things as their ethical obligation, which is what I think they are.
Yeah, average people have to speak up, stand up for each other in order to change the culture.
Yeah, it's hard to do, and I understand that in a lot of those companies, people, especially women, because they tend to often have lower level jobs. I think a lot of the women are worried about losing their positions and the like. So I think it was pretty admirable that there was a group of people, men and women employees, who stepped up for this.
Yeah, so generally speaking, big companies have more resources and social pressure to comply with the rules. What about small to mid-sized companies? What, in your opinion, what are a couple things that can and should be done?
Yeah, well, I think that it is true that it's big companies do have more resources and therefore can do these things. What needs to happen, though, I mean, even some smaller tech companies, they have been subjected to some publicity. I don't know how small it is, but I know I've seen articles about Pinterest, for example, that everybody thinks it's so nice because there's pictures of people, making clothes or whatever. I don't know what they are. I don't really look at Pinterest that much, but I know it's kind of a homey sort of thing. But I've seen some articles where people complain about discrimination and sexual harassment as well. So I think that in some ways, I mean, it's kind of a sad situation, but people do need to speak up. People need to have the wherewithal, if they can, if they're not too worried about losing their jobs, and they shouldn't, to speak up about the problems in those companies, because truthfully, it's not good money-making efforts on the part of companies when people know that they aren't treating their employees in a way that is either inappropriate or unethical. I think most of the people in this community and in most places want companies to behave by ethical standards. They don't want people to cheat consumers, and they don't want people to cheat their employees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you gave me the idea in order to change the, the culture, the big environment. Can we write a bill, kind of a bill proposal to our senator or council assembly member, like, hey, we can, in California, we can pass this kind of law regulation to require all these companies, private sector, to get rid of NDAs and to restructure their internal company policies regarding the sexual harassment and and gender equality and retaliation policies. Like,
right?
You can. Thought about this.
And I do think that the more people write about these things, write letters to the editor or the like, if they know about things, and because, I mean, in truth, it's just not good for those companies, either for their bottom line, or, I mean, which is what many of them, want. But I'm thinking, because you're talking about having the legislature write bills, whether it be about NDAs or whatever. I'm working with Hannah Beth Jackson, who was a former state senator. She wrote the bill. Well, she wrote the bills on equal pay, for one thing, that passed the legislature that were much more stringent. But she also wrote the bill about putting women on boards of companies. And one of the things that I've said is, if there were more women on the board of Google, this never would have happened to them, ever. They would be out that $310 million. There would have been women saying, wait, that's just not acceptable and not appropriate. You need to make sure that these people are punished appropriately. But that women on boards legislation that she passed, the bill, which was Senate Bill 826, I believe, now being fought in the courts. So that's
challenged, you mean?
There's a group that is trying to enjoin it going into effect, although it was in effect, but they amended it. And because there was litigation and a federal judge actually found that a poor shareholder was discriminated against, a white male, because he felt he had to vote for a woman. I mean, it's to be on the board. So, you know, these things don't happen easily, unfortunately. There's always going to be people who fight it, but it's worth the fight.
Yeah, exactly. What we heard is in 2018, California started to require public companies with headquarters in California to have at least one female board member. So
Right.
yeah, it's been 3 years now. Are we talking about the same law?
We are. We
Yeah.
are, because they amended it some to require a few more depending on the size of the board. But it's essentially that bill changed the composition of a really high percentage of California-based public corporations. And there are now many more women, even on tech company boards where there were very few. There are more women finally on the board because they had to comply with the law. But what some of the Pacific Legal Foundation and other groups are trying to make that, to enjoin that bill from operation anymore. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Still, let's like keep going. Yeah, we have to fight.
We do.
Yeah, for our rights. Yeah. So we are mostly talking about changing the private sector. What are your thoughts on holding the powerful in government accountable? And is there anything in the Google settlement that you think could apply to elected officials? Or do you think making changes in sexual harassment policies in government should be approached in a different way?
Well, I don't think it needs, of course, it wouldn't be a shareholder suit unless it could be, I suppose, a taxpayer suit, obviously. But I actually think that it should be easier to require compliance with the law in the public sector. Although I know with regard to discrimination and numbers, I just recently, maybe a couple of months ago, saw a breakdown. This is not about sexual harassment, and I know that's what you wanted to talk about, but I think it's all tied up with discrimination against women. The number of women in LA County that are employed, for example, who are at the highest levels of pay is maybe 1 or 2. And then there are many fewer women that are hired for certain positions that pay better because they are still utilizing those old-fashioned ideas about what, like building inspector, what can the women do? Oh, they couldn't do that by any means. But with regard to sexual harassment, I mean, there are some clear laws about sexual harassment, and there have been discussions. I know the legislature has had a lot of conversations about their problems with sexual harassment, and they've set up a system of, I know I testified before them a couple of years ago about what to do about that problem. I thought there should be an independent agency that they set up to review those complaints against legislators or others, but they now have a process for looking at it. So, I think, I mean, you mentioned Cuomo at the beginning of this, and of course, there have been some notable cases of sexual harassment, usually in the public sector. Usually what happens to those people is kind of like what happened to Cuomo, which is they just have to leave.
Yeah, but like public has to speak up. Otherwise,
Exactly.
it refuse.
That's exactly right.
Thick skin. Yeah.
Mhm.
So what are other things that we can all do in our society as employees and members of society? What should we be alert to? If we don't know something, where can we turn for help?
You mean what if you don't know about sexual harassment and what to do, or if you, I mean, usually in an organization, women, I think the greater problem for women, and this was true at Google, because one of the women who was actually had a baby with the general counsel, and then she was fired and he was promoted. That's yeah. And I think often women feel that they're powerless, and that they cannot speak up. And that, I think, is one of the main problems with these cases, because women don't feel comfortable. They're worried about their jobs. They figure they could just put up with some really obnoxious person who's sexually harassing them, but they shouldn't, because the laws are applicable to the public sector. You cannot sexually harass somebody. So, but women shouldn't have to be forced to bring lawsuits against the company. They should be able to go there and to the top management and say, this is happening to me. If you don't deal with this, then I'm going to make it public.
Yeah, well, with the Google case settlement, we can clearly say, basically, they don't even need to go to public, and Google will take care.
Exactly, they will.
This kind of complaints.
Mm-hmm. But in many other places, they don't feel like they have those kinds of options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see we have some questions from our audience. Let's take answer some questions from audience. Let me see.
Yeah.
So there's a question. One highlights of the settlement was finding ways to address the problem of retaliation. Can you talk about some of the preventative or safeguards in place to deal with this? What protections are there at Google for women who speak up and report sexual harassment? I think that is great. Yeah.
Right. That's a good question. I mean, that was the whole purpose of the diversity and inclusion group that included several women, as well as Fred Alvarez, who was a noted civil rights lawyer. And what happened during the incidents were that none of that information actually was told to some of the broader board. So the board didn't take any kind of action. Well, now they have to. They have to, because those kinds of complaints go through the diversity and inclusion group. There's oversight. There's much more of an audit provision in the settlement, where they need to be apprised of all this information and investigate them and make decisions about them. So that's the mechanism internally for dealing with it.
Yeah, sounds great. We have to feel safe. Report. So next question is, why is getting rid of forced arbitration important? Good question too.
Well, part of the problem with arbitration often is that the person who wants to engage in the arbitration isn't choosing the arbitrator. And for that reason, and they're private, they're not public. And for that reason, they often do not bring the results that can come both personally to the person, but also to the rest of the community, the rest of the company, because it's not public. And that's the problem, because you don't, the complainant doesn't often have the choice over who's going to arbitrate the dispute. And this is true throughout, that having the right to litigate, having the threat even of litigation is much greater to the company. They pay much more attention. I mean, it costs money to have a lawyer, but they usually take a percentage. So it doesn't cost individuals money up front. But it is a much more effective way to make the compensation, as well as for it to be a public decision that everybody will then know about.
Yeah, great to know. I all our audience, especially women, when you sign contract with the big small tech companies, you read through your contracts. You see if you can negotiate for the arbitration optional choice. Yeah. Oh, well, wow, more questions coming in. So how do you see this case global impact in leading the way to change work culture in other countries that are facing similar challenges?
Right. Well, that it should, and I would say that probably one way to deal with that, and I know I've read, thanks to Michelle, a lot about what's happening in China and with Alibaba, and and I think that someone should be able to stand up to them and say, here's how many pages did you say our settlement was? Here's the settlement. Here's what Google and Alphabet ultimately had to do in order to compensate for the failure to treat their employees properly, and to make sure that women who are involved in sexual harassment are not the ones who lose their jobs, but are the ones who can get ahead. So I do think, I felt all along I was very happy with the settlement, because and I have to say Google got it. They were very cooperative. I mean, we did have long negotiations and they didn't agree with everything we wanted, but for the most part, they understood what a place they were in. And until those companies understand that, it maybe needed to spend a little time to pressure them.
Yeah, I hope I can just have a copy of this settlement and Google's the policy changes documents to Alibaba and give them for free for them
exactly
to learn.
Send it on.
Okay. Yeah, our time is about to be up. How about we take a last question? So, what's you're most proud of about this case?
I think what I'm most proud of is the settlement, honestly. It is that we also made it very public. And yet we spent an enormous amount of time, as Michelle said, meeting with the lawyers and meeting in other arenas, of course, with others. But it was clear from our persistence that they needed to change. And I think that they got it. And that's what I'm proud of, because I know a lot of people were saying, oh, lawyers just do these things to get the attorney's fees. Well, we had no idea whether we were ever going to get anything. And it was really just to accomplish this kind of change and be a model for other companies. And that's what I'm hoping for.
I know, and you are a lifelong fighter for women's rights and minority rights. So thank you so much, Anne, for being here with us. Every time I feel so inspired, talk to you, and it gives me a lot of hope that knowing there are fighters like you standing up for all of us. Really, thank you.
Thank you,
really,
Michelle. But I will say to all the women who are on this call, you need to be fighters too. You don't have to fight kind of the way I have, but you know, don't let your bosses or others intimidate you. I mean, that seems to be still part of the culture in this country and in many other countries. And it shouldn't be. It just shouldn't be. Women are smart, they're capable, they're some of the best employees these companies have. They work hard, so they need to make sure that they treat women in the workplace well.
Thank you. Thank you for the encouragement. And
yeah, thank you.
I mean, if you feel hesitating or kind of concerned, you can first find a community like Women We United Together, and you can, have support from us. So we united together, we're stronger, for sure.
That is true. Yeah. That is absolutely true. And you should. And I will say, Michelle and I will be happy to be your community if you need it. I'm saying that to you, Michelle. I'm assuming it because I know you. So I'm sure you will.
We're going to talk more, definitely. So yeah, you're going to be interested too, what I'm about to announce. As a housekeeping item, I'm excited to announce our first offline events in partnership with Vegelution, a nonprofit urban farm in San Jose. We'll be featuring authentic Chinese food, and our wonderful chefs from our immigrant community will cook 3 to 4 dishes to serve more than 100 people, probably 150, from different cultural backgrounds. It's on September 4th, Saturday, from 10 to 12 noon. Lunch will be served around 12 noon. There are a lot of activities on the farm. Bring your family to join us and follow us on our social media for more updates. I hope you can make it too. I know you like spicy food. Maybe we can cook some spicy food for you. September 4th. Okay.
Sounds good.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Our social media, and please find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn under the name of the Society of Hearthy Lights, and on WeChat for Mandarin speakers as Yu Yuan She. Thank you all again for joining us, and stay safe, and hope to see all of you again soon.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Thank you, Anne.